So recently in our community, we've been doing this thing we picked up from Anna Carter Florence's book, Rehearsing Scripture, where we focus on the verbs in a passage instead of the nouns. The idea is that this helps us see beyond the nouns we like to theorize about and forces us to reckon, to reflect, and respond to the verbs of the passage instead. In this conversation, we're looking at the idea of becoming the beloved community together. Not just becoming the beloved community, but moving from being a benevolent community to a beloved community. And First John has been our guide for us in this journey. Over and over again, First John brings us back to the verb love, to love one another. I'm not sure about you, but I'm instantly brought back to the DC Talk classic, Love as a Verb. Hey, tell me, haven't you heard? Love is a serious word. Hey, I think it's time you learned. I don't care what they say. I don't care what you heard. The word love, love is a verb. That's as close as I'm going to get to wrapping it for you guys today. But the reality is that DC Talk, from the time I was a young kid, pointed us in the direction, or pointed me in the direction, that love is a verb, that when we see the word love, we must connect it to action. When we see love as a verb, it demands action from us. And the author of First John is not content to allow us to fill in the definitions of what love could possibly mean. First John chapter 3, verses 11 to 18 says this: "This is the message which you heard right from the start. You see, that we should love one another. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love the family. Anyone who doesn't love abides in death. This is how we know love. He, Jesus, laid down his life for us, and we too ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Anyone who has the means of life in this world and sees a brother or sister in need and closes their heart against them, how can God's love be abiding in them? Children, let us not love in word or in speech, but in deed and in truth." I don't know about you, but I cannot count how many times I've heard people debate about what love is. They will throw out C.S. Lewis's not so great diatribe about the difference between phileo and agape love. They will try to define unloving actions as love. But if we are to move beyond love as a theoretical construct, if we are to move beyond love as a debate, if we are to move from love as defined in First John, we need to understand love as deed, as what we do, and truth. A quick side note: when I was preparing for this message, the Greek text that I was reading had a note to translate the word, which was translated in most of the English translations of verse 3:18 as truth, but to translate it as faithfulness instead. So this verse would read, "Children, let us not love in word or in speech, but in deed and faithfulness." I like understanding the word truth to be a faithfulness. I think it allows us to move closer to the meaning of the text. To love in deed and in truth is to act out faithfully from what love is. To love in deed and in truth means that what we do must be received as love. Just because we say something is loving doesn't make it so. It must be received as love. When we begin to understand this, we see that love is a verb of reciprocity, of mutuality, of interdependence. Beloved becomes the noun of a people or person who actually practice love and reciprocity. So if love is reciprocity, we become the beloved community when we practice love, not just in word, but in deed and in truth and in faithfulness with each other. Does that feel loving to you? Not do I think this feels loving to that person, but allowing agency of the other person to say, no, that wasn't very loving. So creating the beloved community and moving from benevolent is learning the difference between saying, I think this is good, I think this is loving, and moving to the beloved community is asking the question, does this feel loving to you? And saying this is what feels loving to me. To sum it up, the contrast between benevolent community and the beloved community is this. The benevolent community is a community that loves in word and in speech, and the beloved community is the community that goes beyond that to love in deed and in truth and in faithfulness. Love in this way brings life. The one who does not love remains in death. Those who love pass from death to life. Love is an empathetic, compassionate, tangible response to each other's needs. This type of response creates flourishing. Flourishing is life. And it doesn't matter how loving we say we are. If we are not meeting each other in a compassionate response of mutuality, then we are not loving. We may be kind, but we are not loving. I want to pause and expand on the word needs for a moment. When we hear the word needs, we often think of economic depression, but I think we have to be broader in our definition of needs. I think a straightforward way to expand this definition is to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I get that this can be an oversimplification, but it gets us thinking in the right direction. Physiological and security, psychological and self-fulfillment needs. And we tend to only think of needs in the physiological category, food, clothes, and shelter. But it goes deeper and broader than that. So love is showing up in a compassionate response to this deeper and broader idea of needs. I don't think this is a question we ask well in the church, the question of needs. We tend to assume what other people need. And we tend to assume that others know what we need. And as we assume what they need, and what we think we need is often just a desire. So I need money. Well, actually, I would like more money, but I have what I really need in reality. Or I need fill in the blank. And yes, sometimes this is the need. The thing that we name is the need. But sometimes what I share as a need with the community is really just a desire. And there's no shame in that. We should be able to name our needs and our desires in community. But part of the question, I think, is that we also discern with one another as a community what that is. We help each other to discern what our needs are. So for our needs to be seen, we have to trust our community with our needs and desires so that we can discern with one another between them. Because you can see me in a way that I can't see myself. And that is a beautiful thing. Especially in North America, we live in a consumeristic age. The church has become the consumeristic church. And we are constantly mixing up our desires with our needs. And so we say things like, I'm not getting what I need here. But the reality is, we are not getting what we want. And there are times when we are not getting what we need. And in the beloved community, we discern that together. And we trust that we can compassionately show up for one another to meet our needs and to help each other discern this. We love in deed and in truth. We love in what we do and in faithfulness to each other. And this is hard. It's easier to say I love you than it is to allow our actions to speak the word for us. I think this is where we have to come back to the notion of loving in deed and in truth. We have to be honest about what loving means, and that loving is not simple. It is not easy. It takes time. It takes presence. It means sitting with people in their pain and in their joy. It means trusting one another to discern together. Being loving looks like faithfulness to each other. Glenn, our resident hip hop scholar, pointed out that when John is calling us to love in deed and in truth, John is calling us to be real ones for one another. I remember when I was living in Los Angeles, it was my first quarter of seminary and my world had just blown up. I'll save the details as to not accidentally call anyone out, but it suffices to say that I was a wreck. And at this time, it was interesting that a lot of people distanced themselves from me. My pain was hard to be around. My repetitive storytelling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, was hard for people to hear. In this season, my real ones showed up. Homies like Glenn and others who were present, who would call, and who were there for me. But one person who surprised me was one of my Bible college professors who had been a mentor for me the last couple years in Bible college, Pastor Mike. It didn't surprise me that he showed up, but the depth and the level at which he showed up. For the better part of 6 months, he walked with me almost daily, encouraging me and helping me to put things back together piece by piece. Pastor Mike was one of the busiest people I knew. He taught a full load of classes at the Bible college, was on staff as a pastor at a local church, and served as a mentor to many while being ever present as an attentive husband and father. His presence in my life was one of the most tangible expressions of what being the beloved community is that I've ever experienced. I will also say this about Pastor Mike. He is one of the most disciplined and intentional people I know. That is why I asked him to be my mentor in Bible college. So him showing up didn't look like us commiserating together about how much things sucked. It looked like us collaborating on what was clearly my problem and forming a pathway towards wholeness that took a lot of work. He put boundaries on our time and a trajectory on our work together. I know for myself, sometimes when I think about showing up as loving, I get a little bit squeamish. I get a little bit hesitant because we often think of being loving as being boundaryless and aimless. But that wouldn't have been loving or what I actually needed in that moment. So Pastor Mike was one of the people who helped me to actually understand that loving, it comes with boundaries and it comes with a trajectory. And so the goal isn't to bleed on each other, but to help heal each other, to move from death to life together. The goal is to show up as a compassionate response to each other's needs. The goal is to be a community of real ones. The goal is to become the beloved community together.